Welcome to another Silph meta-analysis. This time is July's Architect Cup, which is also the featured regionals meta for many of you participating. This time, this cup does not feature types, categories, or anything. Instead, it features 60 Pokemon handpicked by whoever created the meta, I suppose. You will see some popular things, some not so popular things. Popular including Trevenant, Lapras, maybe even Frostlass, and then not so popular including things like, more importantly, Beware at the very top of PvPoke's meta list or rankings. So let's look at what these 40 Pokemon have in store for us today. So when we look at all the Pokemon, we're actually missing 4 types total. There are no Steel, Fairy, Dragon, or Electric types, and we immediately, from other metas and from, my experience with the game and what the meta shapes out to be, Steel types are the bulkiest thing in the meta. Most resistances tends to have really good stat product, health, and defense included. And their primary weakness is fighting type Pokemon. Without steel types, like in the previous meta, Forged, or maybe something like Retro Cup, we often resort to normal and dark type Pokemon next. They have very few weaknesses, and most of them, there's a large enough pool of Pokemon to pick from that allow us to look for bulky things such as Lickitung, Umbreon, Mandibuzz, stuff like that. So without steels, we're probably looking at normals and darks. Without fairies, we're looking at the standard anti-fighters, which are in the form of Psychic, Flying, and Ghost. There are resistances available as well through Bug and Poison. Dragons and electric types, however, are just generalist typings. They don't really have a true purpose in most metas. They're just dealing good damage against most of what is available, but never enough to make them super important. Pokemon that we have few options for are fighting. In fact, we have only 2 fighting type Pokemon. We will be searching for fighting type moves in other Pokemon such as Snorlax and Sudowoodo. Psychic, there's not very many options. Rather, there aren't any good options at all either. So we are going to be left with the final anti-fighting type, Flying. As you can see, we have lots of options. Rock, not very many options either, although Rock is not usually a very good typing either. And then last but not least, we have very few ground type options. These are not very nice either. So with Steel type being banned, our tanks are now normal and dark. With Fairy type being banned and Psychic types being heavily unavailable, our flyers / anti-fighters are in the form of Flying. And even though there are so few fighting type options, there are fighting type substitutes. And the importance of fighting type can never be underestimated, because fighting types are going to be the primary counters to steel, normal, and dark. They have very few other weaknesses, in this case steel obviously being banned. So fighting types, no matter how bad the fighting type pool will be, as long as it is available, it tends to be powerful. So with the available typings, fighting types are widely unchecked. No fairies, very few psychics. Poison and Bug can only take you so far with resistances. Last but not least, we have flying types, which honestly don't have that great flying type damage. The best way to beat something is to deal super effective damage to it. However, you're looking at Wing Attack, which is an energy-based move, no flying type moves on Gyarados, and Acrobatics, which is an expensive nuke on Jumpluff. So fighting types are the best type in the Architect meta. However, just because we don't have good flying type options doesn't mean we have very many other options. In case we don't really have very many options other than a couple of bug and poison types such as Beedrill or Scolipede. But if flying type beats those kinds of counters to fighting, why choose a secondary one? So we're stuck with things like Gyarados, Pelipper, Golbat at the top of the meta as our anti-fighter. And it kind of, it's not a bad thing, because some of our other counters to flying types aren't really happy with that water typing. Normally when we're trying to deal with water flying, we want electric, which is banned. And then when it comes down to ice, ice is dealing neutral damage because of the secondary water typing. And then rock takes super effective damage from water in some cases, but we only have Sudowoodo and Cradily, so it's kind of an interesting move pool or pick pool. So with the water typings, or with the flying typings that we have, they're not great, but they're not bad either. They're interesting. They're widely unchecked for, kind of like fighting, but they need to check for fighting, which is widely unchecked for. So you will notice a lot of this throughout the meta. Two things are present. There is a lot of charge move pressure, as well as a lot of close matchups. This meta avoids a lot of hard counters, because when you remove things like steel, you remove the necessity to use fighting types or certain types of fighting types. If you remove something like Medicham from a meta, then you must rely on fighters that have more natural weaknesses to things like poison or things like flying, which Medicham has no problem with a lot of the times. So with that being said, where does normal fit? Normal is just kind of there because it takes on the tank role. Normally it's done by the dark typing. However, all the dark types that we have available have secondary typings, thus secondary roles. They're not good at what normal dark types usually do. So our primary bulky, take mostly resistant damage, or neutral damage, and then deal a lot of neutral damage, is in the form of normal type. Because, for example, Drapion, it's not a dark type damage dealer. Neither is Skuntank, neither is Shiftry half the time. Shiftry's just bad, no offense. You Shiftry, I'm sorry. So when we look at the best typings and what's available, we're looking at fighting type having its own role in the meta. We have normal and dark being the tanks and taking super effective damage from fighting, obviously. And then we kind of have a secondary tank role in the form of ice and rock, because dark and normal are not typings you want to use to deal with bug and flying efficiently. If you bring a Snorlax into a Gyarados, it's going to be neutral. Pelipper, it's going to be neutral. You could beat Golbat because it doesn't have the option of using Shadow Ball. But what happens when you have a bug-type Pokemon, which would deal super effective damage to Dark, or in some cases would be pretty darn good at dealing with some of your normal options. You can resist Superpower, and which is Beware's primary move. Snorlax is Superpower, which is in some cases the better move. Bug would also resist Punchax's Bulldoze. So it limits the options of some of these normal types as well. So we have 4 categories here: the fighters, the anti-fighters in the form of bug and flying, and then, although there aren't actually that many bug type options, not great ones, but they do the job. Poison is in the middle because it kind of goes neutral against everything in the meta. Whatever poison types are available as well are kind of split between a lot of other typings that are available. As you can see, bug poison, flying poison, pure straight poison, dark poison, and then water poison as well. Poison has different play based off of which poison type you're using, so it's sitting right in the middle. It's a neutral Pokemon, neutral typing. So it doesn't really tell you much about the meta though. However, what's the biggest takeaway here is that fighting sits above all, and here are your anti-fighters, because the most important thing here is there are 2 fighting types that are available, 3 that are reasonable: Beware, Sudowoodo, and Poliwrath. So when you are looking at the meta, those are going to be your 3 best options. And although Pseudo-Wudo has different typing, it does do the job when you're dealing with certain normal and dark type Pokemon. So I have built a team over here. This team uses Beware to start because it is honestly the best Pokemon. Very few resistances, very few things that resist it, and very few things that deal super effective damage to it as well. Beware in terms of typing is very similar to Scrafty. It is a fighter that loses to other fighters. In terms of playstyle, it is similar to Melmetal, where you have high energy generation. You try to chip away with Rock Slide. In this case, it would be Stomp for Beware. And then you have Superpower trying to nuke most Pokemon out of existence using a back-to-back, Superpower, similar to Pokemon with back-to-back close combats or wild charges and stuff like that. So because there are so few things that deal with fighting, it's actually going to be pretty natural for people to end up picking 2, maybe even 3 of these fighter options. As I mentioned, we have Beware, Poliwrath, and Pseudo-Wudo. So with Beware being on every team or some other fighter, looking at some of the anti-fighters is going to be important. Snorlax, for the same reason, typing, very widely unresisted, has a fighting type move. It is very much like Beware, but without the fighting type weakness. So if you are looking for something that is similar to Beware and its role and its potential without the flying type weakness, like things like Pelipper or Gyarados, something that goes more neutral, you could go for something like Snorlax as well, like Munchlax, like Clicky Licky. They are all options. I think one of the best picks in the meta are going to be Muck, because the flying types, the best flying types, are going to be water flying. The one good electric type attacker in this meta is going to be Muck. It has a cheap, solid Thunder Punch, especially paired with good Poison Jab damage. You can't really go wrong as using Muck as your primary anti-flyer. And then if you struggle with things like Golbat and using Muck, that's not really a problem because you can use other things to deal with Golbat, such as Snorlax, such as Pseudo-Wudo, such as your own flyer. Pelipper would beat Golbat. Same with Gyarados, I believe. And then Pelipper, I like having that because it is a different form of an anti-fighter. Always making sure you can check for fighting is very important, whether that is in the form of Poliwrath or whether that is in the form of Beware or Pseudo-Wudo as well. So last but not least, in the team, I have Frostlass because it is a very comfortable pick. I'm very scared of using Ghost type in a meta with this much normal. However, Frostlass is one of actually the only Ghost type Pokemon that I know of that can flip matchups against a normal type Pokemon with either excess energy or in the Zero Shields. 2 Avalanches can knock out anything that is normal in the most cases. So these picks for me are more so comfort picks. When you build your team, you'll find it not too difficult to find a coverage in A as long as you have Beware. Beware may be a difficult Pokemon to use, but it is still the most powerful. So, with that said, take a quick look at what you want to start when you, obviously, you want to pick with something that's comfortable, but I would actually recommend in this case, in this meta, try to pair something with Beware and find what fits best for you, because Beware is going to be super important, and trying to find something that complements it is going to be your key to winning in this meta. All right. Peace.